It's time for another Dice Tower review with Tim Jennette.
Hey everyone, this is Tim Jennette, the Metal Meeple, and in this video we're taking a look at Senshi by Arcane Wonders, published in 2018. It's by designer Dan Manfredini, and the artist is Stephen Gibson. It's a 2 to 4 player game. It takes roughly 15 to 20 minutes, and it's more of like a filler game. So the master is dying, you're a monk, and you're called you want to take the role of Senshi, but only one of you can replace him, so you're kind of fighting it out, testing in like strength, agility, wisdom, and honor. Realistically though, the theme is pretty light. This is more of an abstract game where you're taking tiles, stacks of tiles from the middle and sticking them on your player card and trying to score those tiles. And then at the end of the game, whoever has the highest stack will be the winner, but whoever has the lowest stack is actually going to be eliminated. So you can't do all really good in one and all really bad in another, because you might actually get eliminated. Let's run down the overview of the game and we'll come back and I'll tell you what I think. So here we have the setup for a 4-player game of Senshi. If you're playing less than 4 players, you would remove some of each of these tiles of each color. Otherwise, you're going to use them all. You're going to put them in the middle of the table, shuffle them all up, and stack them in groups of 3s. There's no restrictions, so they can be all the same color, or they can be 2 colors next to each other. But essentially, you're going to randomize all these stacks of 3. Then each player is going to also receive one of these player cards. This is going to have spots for the 3 stacks that they can have, as well as their scoring area at the bottom, and it also shows you the 3 actions that you can take on your turn. Before you begin, each player is going to choose one of these stacks to keep into their hand, and that's going to be important later on and as the game goes on, but this is hidden from play from all the other players. Now, when it is your turn, you have 1 of 3 actions you can take, the first action being that you can study, which is take 1 stack. So you can take any of these stacks and place it on an empty spot of your 3 little empty spots here, and then it would be the next player's turn. The second type of action that you can take would be take 1 tile. Now, as the game progresses, players are going to get different stacks on their board here, and then as you get to take 1 tile, you can choose to take the top tile of any stack on any player's board, including your own, or in the middle. The reason you want to do this is kind of twofold. One, if you want to take it from one of the stacks on the player cards, that's just going to reveal the tile below it. You know, so say you didn't want him to have a yellow on top and you want green instead. There's some strategy involved there. But anyway, the second reason is for the third action, which is simply to play 1 tile. When you play a tile from your hand, let's say we had something like this set up and it looked like this. When you play a tile from your hand, let's just say we have this in our hand too. You're going to play a tile from your hand and it's going to go into your scoring area. So we play green, and this green is going to go below here, as well as all the greens on top of each of our stacks, but only the top one. So this green and this green, these greens would not score because they weren't the top tile. But you can see now we have a little stack of 3 green. The only caveat though is that each other player in turn order also gets to do this. They don't get any ones from their hand, but on top they get to score that. So he would score this green, this player would score this green, and this player wouldn't score anything. So some of the strategy is looking about what players might be going for. Obviously this player might want to score blue next, so you kind of want to set yourself up for blues because they're going to end up scoring it, or you can beat them to the punch and score blue first because you do get that extra point from your hand. Anyway, this is going to continue. Each player gets to choose 1 action until all of the stacks in the middle of the board have been taken. At that point, each player gets 1 final round, or 1 final turn, including the player who took the last stack, and then we move on to scoring. So here's kind of a mock-up of the in-game scoring. The first thing you're going to do is determine who has the smallest stack, and that player or players will be eliminated. This player has 2 red and 2 blue. This player has 2 yellow. It looks like 2 is the lowest stack value. And it doesn't matter the colors, but since these 2 players have tied for the lowest value stack, they're both eliminated from the game. If all players would have tied for this, then you simply ignore it, but most of the time it's going to be 1 or 2 players that get eliminated. And then you move on to the final scoring to determine the winner, and it's whoever has the tallest stack, no matter the color, and in this case it looks like it's green who has 5 green tiles. Now there is a tiebreaker, there's a couple of them, but the first tiebreaker is basically whoever has the most tiles in hand, and the last tiebreaker, I believe, it's whoever went last in turn order, I believe. And anyway, at that point, you just determine the winner, and that's game over. So let's talk about what I think. And there you go, that is the overview of Senshi. Now, just as a disclaimer, I did receive this from the publisher as a review copy, so keep that in mind as we talk about my thoughts. The first thing I'm going to say is that I was really excited that the game is a Japanese-themed game. Even though the theme doesn't do anything for the game at all. I mean, you don't need to know the theme. You can pretty much put whatever theme you want on this. It's straight mechanisms going to work here, right? The theme has nothing to do with it. I do like the theme they chose for it just because I like Japanese and the feudal Japan era, so it works out for me, but taking that aside and just focusing strictly on the game, it's more abstract in nature, which is fine, but we'll get into a couple of things with that. First, the components are great. Those tiles are nice and thick and chunky, and they stack together. If you see during the video, they actually do set, they have like a little piece that they inset into each other, so you can have them stacked, and it's pretty cool that there is no actual central board, so you can kind of play this on like a bar stool if you wanted, if you're somewhere. I don't know if I'd play it in a place where you might knock everything over, but you can pretty much play it anywhere and not have to have a lot of room to play it on. And I thought that was pretty cool. Talking about the components and the setup, it's not as tedious as you might think it is just by watching the video and me explaining. You just pour out all the pieces in a pile, and even if you're playing 2 players, you can stack those in stacks of 3s really fast. And even with 4 players, that thing just gets set up really quick. So it's not as tedious as it might seem. I kind of thought it would be in the very beginning, but after a couple plays, you're like, no, this is just super quick, right? So that's not a big deal. The player cards are cool. They're not that big of a deal. They're just a player card, somewhere to put your stuff. They're probably not necessary if you know, but it does help to keep things organized. So let's talk about the gameplay and what I think. Well, it took me a few plays to really dive into this game. The first couple of plays, I was kind of like, I mean, is there strategy to this? And then you start realizing that you want to set people up. You want to have their pieces up on the right color so that when you score, they don't. Things like that, or if they're trying to go for a complete score of one color, maybe follow along and tag team onto it, you know, so that you don't have to waste an action to actually score chips, and then you come back with a next score. So it's kind of what stacks that you pick, and then maybe the tiles that you take off the tops of them, and kind of trying to remember what people might have as far as what they took. That way you know, he probably can't score blue right now. He'll have to take one. So there is a second level of depth to strategy that comes out after a couple plays, and you'll see that real quick. But overall, the game is pretty light. It is a very fast game. I do like how quick it is. Even if you play it a couple of times, I mean, the game it's 15 minutes per period, no matter how many players, you know. And I like that. I like that it's short and quick. The only interesting thing about it being the type of abstract game that it is it seems like for our group, we like filler games to mostly be games that you can kind of converse with, right? So you show up at game night and you start playing a filler game waiting for somebody else to show up and you're talking. Or you just played a really heavy game and you want to play another game to kind of take your mind off of it, or you're kind of talking about that game while you're playing this one. Something like Zombie Dice, right? You're just kind of talking and rolling or whatever. This is a very quiet game that we found, at least with our group and the people that we play it with. No one wants to talk. You're just sitting there staring at the board like a chess game, right? And so that's kind of neat that it does that, but I do like the filler games to be a little bit more where you can talk. I mean, I guess you could talk with this. It just seems like the game really wants people to focus in for that 15 minutes, and that's cool. I just think that it's worth noting that everybody I played with was very quiet. So it's just something to point out in case you're looking for a game that you just want to play in the meantime and then have a conversation with. This might not be the best game for that, but the game is really good. It's, you know, it is what it is. It's a 15-minute game. There's not that many levels of strategy to it, but by the time you would want more, the game ends. So it's a perfect length for what it's delivering, and I think it does it really well. Great components, super artwork. And the scoring is by far one of my favorite things about the game because I love those the scoring where at the end it's like, you don't have enough of one thing, you're eliminated. And then you have the most of one thing, you're in. You're the winner. So I really like the scoring of this. It forces you to focus in all four of the categories, the colors or whatever, which I guess kind of ties back into the theme with the test of the agility and the might and the wisdom and stuff. It works out that way. But for the most part, the theme otherwise doesn't really apply. So I really like this game. It's not my favorite filler, but it is one that I'll keep around and play. I do have a couple of people who really like it. There is a couple of people who don't like it all, simply because the fact that it's more of a focusing game. You have to really pay attention to what's going on and kind of look at other people. It's not like one of those fillers where you can just roll dice and move along. So anyway, if you have any questions, feel free to comment or post below. You can also email me at timjennette@gmail.com. Follow me on social media at the handle. Check out my podcast called Meeple Core. And until next time, keep on rocking and rolling dice.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.